It was early spring when she first noticed the little cottage. From the moment her car pulled onto the winding road, the house seemed to call out to her. Tucked behind a line of trees half hidden by the creeping vines and moss, the small structure looked forgotten, like something from another time. The faded blue paint on the walls and the crooked roof gave it character. But there was something else, something more inviting in the way the house sat in its own little world. The first time she saw it, she almost drove past, but something made her stop. The for sale sign was weathered and worn, the letters barely visible, as though no one had bothered to care for it in years. It looked like a place that had been abandoned, a house left to slowly fade away. But despite that, there was something oddly charming about it. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it didn't need to be. It looked like the kind of house that held memories, the kind of place where stories were born. And for her, that was enough. The woman who lived alone, tucked into the suburbs, had always dreamed of owning her own home. She was no longer young, but there was a quiet hope inside her that refused to fade, a dream of finding a place where she could settle down, maybe even spend her retirement years. Over the years, she'd looked at houses, but each time something didn't feel right. They were too big, too expensive, or too far from the quiet life she'd always wanted. And as the years passed, the dream seemed to fade a little more each time. But this cottage? It felt different. Something about it spoke to her. The more she looked at it, the more she saw its potential. She could imagine sitting on the front porch sipping a cup of tea, watching the seasons change. She could already see herself planting flowers in the garden, filling the empty rooms with the warmth of home. Still, there was something a little strange about the house. As she walked around the yard, her shoes crunching on the dry leaves scattered across the ground, she noticed how quiet it was. No birds, no wind through the trees, just an odd kind of stillness. It didn't make her nervous. It was more like it was waiting for her, as though the house had been patiently sitting here, waiting for someone to notice it again. Her fingers brushed against the peeling paint on the front door as she pushed it open. The hinges creaked loudly as though it hadn't been opened in years. The smell hit her immediately, musty and damp like the inside of an old chest. The floors were creaky, the windows thick with dust. And yet she didn't feel unwelcome. It was as though the house was giving her a quiet invitation to stay. Walking through the rooms, she felt a kind of peace settle over her. The walls were empty, save for faded wallpaper that had long lost its color. The rooms were small, simple. Not much had been done to update the place, but that was part of the charm. There was a certain quiet in the way the place had aged, like a well-worn book that had been read so many times it had become a part of you. But that was just the surface. The house held more than just the marks of time. It had its secrets too. She noticed a strange thing as she moved through the rooms. The floor in the kitchen seemed to dip slightly under her feet. It wasn't much, but it caught her attention. She thought it might just be the way the house settled, the uneven foundation that came with age. But then she felt it again, a subtle shift in the floor, a hollow sound when she stepped near the back wall. The kind of sound you get when you walk over something that isn't solid beneath the surface. It piqued her curiosity. She walked back over to the spot and tapped her foot lightly on the floor. The hollow sound echoed back, confirming what she already suspected. Something was under there. She wasn't sure what it could be. An old pipe maybe, or space left unused by whoever had lived here before. But there was definitely something beneath the floorboards, hidden away. She bent down, brushing her fingers against the old wood, trying to find a seam, a crack, a way to lift the board and see what lay underneath. But it was solid, just old and worn. It was probably nothing, she told herself. Just a trick of the house settling. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave her. Even after she left the cottage that day, after she drove back to her small rented apartment, she couldn't shake the thought of what was underneath that floor. The house stayed with her in a way that no other place had. The following days were spent thinking about it, about the cottage, about the way it felt, about the quiet promise it seemed to hold. The more she thought about it, the more she wanted it. The price tag was surprisingly low for a place like this, especially considering the location. It was far from the bustle of the city, but not too far to be inconvenient. The only thing that seemed strange was the price. Most homes in the area went for far more. Was there something she was missing? A week later, she called the real estate agent. She didn't ask about the price. Instead, she scheduled a time to meet and walk through the house again. There was something about it that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just a house. It was a feeling, a pull that she couldn't explain. The agent was a young man, friendly and eager to help. As they walked through the rooms together, he mentioned how the previous owner had passed away several years ago. "It's been on the market for a while," he explained, "but no one seems to want it. I think people just don't see the potential here." She nodded, though she didn't quite understand. To her, the potential was obvious. The small cottage needed work, yes, but there was a beauty to it. She could imagine it with fresh paint, a new roof, new floors, a place she could truly call home. The price was a steal, and yet the more she looked at the house, the more she felt like there was something she wasn't seeing. It felt almost like the house was hiding something from her, something it wasn't quite ready to reveal. As she walked through the rooms again, the thought of the hollow floor kept creeping into her mind. She had to know what was under there, but there was no time to investigate that today. The agent was talking about paperwork and the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows through the windows. "I'll take it," she said suddenly, surprising both herself and the agent. The words felt natural, like they had been there all along, just waiting for her to say them. The agent's face lit up, and he began talking about the next steps, but she hardly heard him. Her mind was already imagining what she could do with the place, how she could make it her own. Later that night, sitting at the kitchen table in her small apartment, she thought about her decision. It was impulsive, she knew that, but she couldn't help herself. There was something about the cottage, something she couldn't put into words. Maybe it was just the idea of having a place to call her own. Maybe it was the quiet mystery of the house that called to her. Either way, she was going to find out what lay beneath those floorboards. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had made the right choice. Tomorrow she would return to the cottage, but this time she would stay. She couldn't wait to return to the cottage. After making the decision to buy the house, she felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't a feeling she was used to. It wasn't excitement or nervousness, but a quiet certainty. The house was hers now, and no matter how strange or unusual it seemed, it was her next chapter. The morning after finalizing the paperwork, she drove back to the cottage. The drive felt different this time. She wasn't just passing by a house that caught her eye. She was on her way to her new home, the place that would soon be hers in every way. As she turned off the main road and headed down the winding lane, the trees around her seemed to welcome her, their branches swaying gently in the spring breeze. The world outside the car felt peaceful and still, like a hidden corner of the world that no one else knew about. When she reached the cottage, she parked her car in the small gravel driveway and stepped out. The house looked the same, weathered, worn, but still charming. The door creaked open as she pushed it gently, and the musty smell of the old house hit her again. Though this time, it felt more familiar. She spent the next few hours walking around the house, planning what to do first. There was a lot of work ahead of her, fixing the roof, replacing the old windows, and clearing out the overgrown garden. But it was all part of the charm. She could see the potential everywhere. It would take time, but slowly she could transform this little cottage into a place she could truly call home. As she explored, she found herself drawn to the kitchen again, to that spot on the floor where she had noticed something strange the day she first visited. She walked over to it, feeling that same sense of curiosity bubbling up. The floorboards were old, but they looked sturdy enough, and yet, when she pressed down with her foot, she heard that same hollow sound, like there was something hidden underneath. She crouched down, running her fingers over the wood, trying to find any sign of how she might be able to lift the board. There was no visible seam, no crack, nothing that hinted at what lay beneath. It was as if the house was purposely hiding something. "Maybe I'm imagining things," she muttered to herself, standing up and brushing her hands on her jeans. But the feeling didn't go away. She had to know what was underneath that floor. Something was there, and for some reason she couldn't just leave it alone. After a quick lunch, she decided to go to a nearby hardware store. She was planning to pick up some basic supplies for the renovation, but in the back of her mind, she kept thinking about the floorboard. Maybe she could find something there to help her figure it out. A crowbar or something that might make lifting the board easier. She didn't want to damage the house, but she also didn't want to leave any stone unturned. When she got back to the cottage later that afternoon, she immediately went to the kitchen, eager to investigate. She carefully set her new tools down on the table and walked over to the spot on the floor. This time she was more determined. She wasn't going to let a few creaky boards stand in her way. She knelt down and placed the flat end of the crowbar against the edge of the floorboard, applying gentle pressure. At first, nothing happened, but then with a soft pop, the board shifted just a little. She smiled, feeling a wave of triumph. Slowly, carefully, she worked the crowbar underneath the board, prying it up bit by bit. It wasn't easy. The board was old and the wood had swollen over the years. But it wasn't as difficult as she had expected either. After a few minutes of careful work, the board came loose. Her heart raced as she lifted it completely, revealing a dark space underneath. It was small, maybe only a few feet wide, but it was enough to make her feel a little thrill run through her. What was hidden down there? She grabbed her flashlight and shined it into the dark space. The beam of light revealed a small cavity in the ground. At first, she thought it might just be an old storage space, maybe something built for supplies or tools. But as she leaned in closer, she noticed something that caught her eye. A rusted metal latch. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just a storage space after all. With trembling hands, she reached in and lifted the latch. There was a faint groan as something shifted beneath her. The floor around the cavity gave way slightly and she hesitated, wondering if she had uncovered something dangerous. But the desire to know what was hidden there was too strong to stop now. She carefully slid her hand into the cavity and felt around. It was cold, the air stale and musty, but there was something else, something solid. She grasped it and pulled it out, dragging it into the light. It was a small, heavy metal box, covered in layers of dust and dirt. The box was rusted and old, its edges worn smooth from years of being hidden away. Her pulse quickened as she examined the box in her hands. It wasn't just any box. It had a strange pattern etched into the surface, intricate designs that seemed to tell a story of their own. She couldn't make sense of it, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had found something that had been hidden away in the house for who knows how long. She brushed off the dirt and dust and tried to open it, but the lid wouldn't budge. It was rusted shut. She grabbed a pair of pliers from her toolbox and carefully worked on the latch. After a few minutes, she heard a small click and the lid of the box popped open. Inside, she found old papers, stacks of yellowed documents, some folded, some rolled up tightly. They looked ancient, fragile. She carefully pulled one of the rolled papers free and unfurled it. It was a map, but not like any map she had ever seen. The lines were old, drawn in faded ink, and the symbols marked on it were strange and unfamiliar. Her fingers trembled as she traced the lines of the map. It seemed to lead to the very house she was standing in, but the symbols didn't make any sense. There were no street names, no landmarks she recognized, just a winding path and several strange markings. She set the map down gently and dug through the rest of the papers. There were more maps, some even older than the first, and then, buried at the bottom, she found something that made her heart race. It was a journal, small and leather-bound, its edges worn and tattered. The handwriting inside was faint but legible. The first few pages were filled with descriptions of the house and its surroundings. But as she flipped through the pages, she began to realize that this was no ordinary journal. It was the diary of the person who had once lived in the house, someone who had written about things she could hardly believe. The diary spoke of hidden treasures, of secrets that were buried deep beneath the house. It described a collection of rare and valuable items, all of which had been hidden away in the very walls she now stood in. The more she read, the more it seemed like this was no ordinary house. It was a place of hidden history, a place that held more than just memories. It held something far more valuable. She sat back, overwhelmed by what she had just discovered. What had she stumbled upon? Who had hidden all of this away, and why? The questions flooded her mind, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. Whatever secret this house held, she was about to uncover it. With the box, the papers, and the diary in her hands, she knew she couldn't stop now. She had to keep going, to dig deeper into the mystery of the house. There was something here, something important, and she was determined to find out what it was. She closed the box carefully and set it on the kitchen table, her mind racing with the possibilities. This cottage, which had seemed so ordinary at first, was anything but. The more she uncovered, the more she realized she was standing on the edge of something huge. What had been hidden away in this house for so many years? And why? There was no turning back now. The mystery had begun, and she was ready to follow it wherever it led. The days following her discovery passed in a blur. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had found hidden beneath the floorboards. The box, the strange maps, and most of all the diary. It all felt like a riddle waiting to be solved. What did the symbols mean? Who had hidden these things here and why? And what was this collection that the diary spoke of? It was almost impossible to focus on anything else. Every time she walked through the house, her mind kept wandering back to the strange objects in the box. The idea of a hidden treasure, something valuable buried right under her feet, kept gnawing at her. The house, which had already felt so full of history, now seemed like it was waiting to reveal something even greater. The diary, in particular, intrigued her. It was clear the writer had spent years documenting things, and not just the house, but something deeper. There were stories of people, strange events, and cryptic messages scattered throughout the pages. It was as if the writer had been trying to record everything, trying to preserve something important, but it was hard to make sense of it all. The words felt heavy, like they were leading her toward something, but she couldn't quite figure out what. One afternoon, while she sat at the kitchen table with the diary in front of her, she read another entry that caught her attention. It spoke of the Asheville collection, a term that had appeared a few times in the diary but never fully explained. The writer mentioned that the collection had been hidden in the house for safekeeping, protected from thieves, and only those who knew the house's secrets would be able to find it. She ran her fingers over the page, feeling a chill creep up her spine. The collection? What was it? The idea of treasure seemed too far-fetched. But the more she read, the more it seemed like this was no ordinary house. There was something special about it, something that no one had realized, and until now. She had to keep digging. The thought of leaving this mystery unsolved felt impossible. She knew that uncovering whatever lay hidden in this house could change everything, but there was still so much she didn't understand. The maps, the cryptic symbols, the diary entries, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture wasn't clear yet. She decided to spend the next few days carefully studying the diary. She would take notes, try to decode the references, and see if she could find any clues that might lead her closer to the truth. But as the days passed, it became clear that the answers weren't going to be easy to find. The more she read, the more questions piled up. There were references to people she had never heard of, names that didn't seem to match anyone from the area. There were also strange references to objects, some of which seemed almost otherworldly. One evening, after another long day of poring over the diary, she decided to take a break and walk outside. The evening air was cool and fresh, and as she stood on the porch looking out over the small yard, she felt a sense of peace. It was hard to explain, but there was something comforting about the house. Even though it was old, even though it had secrets, it felt like it was hers. She had always longed for a place to call home, a place where she could feel rooted, where she could grow old and create new memories. But she had never imagined it would be a house with a hidden past, with mysteries buried beneath its floorboards. She thought about how strange it was, how this house had been so ordinary at first and now it was anything but. As she stood there, lost in thought, she heard something, a rustling sound almost like footsteps. She turned quickly, half expecting to see someone standing at the edge of the yard. But there was no one there. The yard was empty, the trees standing still in the evening light. The wind? Maybe, but it didn't feel like wind. It felt like a presence, a subtle shift in the air, a reminder that there was more to this house than met the eye. Shaking off the unease, she returned to the house. As she stepped through the door, her gaze fell on the box again, still sitting on the kitchen table. She had to know more. The diary had mentioned the collection multiple times, but it had never explained what it actually was. She picked up the box and examined it again, running her fingers over the etched patterns. They looked like symbols, ancient, intricate, and somehow familiar. She couldn't place where she had seen them before, but something about them nagged at her. It was as if she was on the edge of remembering something important. Suddenly, she had an idea. The maps. Maybe the symbols on the box were connected to the ones on the old maps she had found. She grabbed one of the maps, spreading it out on the table next to the box. As she compared the two, she felt a small thrill. The shapes, the lines, the patterns, and they matched. It was subtle, but they were the same. These weren't just random markings. They were guiding her, pointing her in a direction. Her heart raced as she traced the lines of the map with her finger. If she was right, then these symbols were part of a key, a key to finding the hidden collection. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to follow the map, see where it led. The thought of uncovering something so valuable, something that had been hidden away for so long, was too powerful to resist. The next morning, she packed a small bag and decided to explore. She had no clear idea of what she was looking for, but the map seemed to suggest something close, a landmark maybe, or a hidden compartment in the house. Whatever it was, she was determined to find it. She spent hours walking the grounds around the house, carefully inspecting the trees, the rocks, and the areas near the edge of the yard. It felt like searching for a needle in a haystack, but she couldn't stop. There was something about this place that was pulling her in, urging her to keep going. Just as the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the land, she noticed something. A small, almost hidden path behind a thicket of trees. It was faint, overgrown with weeds, but there was something about it that felt significant. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she was just imagining things, but then she remembered the diary, how the writer had spoken of hidden paths and secret places. This was it. This was what she had been looking for. She pushed through the dense foliage, her heart pounding with anticipation. The path led her deeper into the woods, where the trees grew thicker and the air grew cooler. It felt like she was walking into another world, a place where the past and present merged together. After what seemed like an eternity, the path opened up into a small clearing. At the center of the clearing was a large stone, smooth and flat as though it had been placed there intentionally. She walked toward it, her breath catching in her throat. The stone was covered in the same strange symbols she had seen in the box, on the maps, and in the diary. Her hands trembled as she touched the stone. There was something odd about it, something that felt wrong, as if it didn't belong there. She pushed against it, half expecting it to be a secret door or hidden compartment. At first nothing happened, but then with a soft rumble, the stone began to shift. It was happening. The stone was moving. Her pulse raced as the stone slowly slid to the side, revealing a narrow hole beneath it. It was dark inside, too dark to see anything. She reached into her bag and grabbed her flashlight, shining the beam into the opening. What she saw took her breath away. The hole was filled with old, dusty crates, some large, some small, all stacked neatly in the dark space. And at the very bottom, barely visible in the shadows, was a chest. A large metal chest. Her heart skipped a beat. She had found it. The hidden collection. The chest in the hole was a sight that made her heart race. She had found it. The collection, or at least part of it. But there was still so much she didn't know. The excitement that had been building inside her since she first discovered the box under the floorboards had now reached a peak. What was inside that chest? And what had the writer of the diary been trying to protect all these years? Her hands trembled as she crouched down, reaching toward the dark opening beneath the stone. The beam of her flashlight flickered as she shone it into the hole, illuminating the chest. It was old, its surface tarnished with years of dirt and grime. The metal was weathered, but it still held a strange, almost magnetic aura. She could sense that whatever was locked inside was important in a way that she couldn't yet understand. The chest had a heavy, rusted lock on the front. It looked as if it hadn't been opened in decades, maybe even longer. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her. Every step she had taken in the past few days, every piece of the puzzle she had uncovered had led her here. Now, with the chest so close, the only thing left was to open it. But she hesitated. There was something about this moment that felt almost too surreal. What if the chest was empty? What if the treasure wasn't a physical object at all, but something else? What if opening it brought consequences she couldn't foresee? The fear was real, but it didn't stop her. She had already come this far. Taking a deep breath, she reached into her bag and pulled out the rusty tool she had found earlier, a crowbar that she had used to lift the floorboard. She pressed it gently into the lock, testing the strength of the metal. The lock didn't give easily, but after a few careful twists and turns, it finally clicked open. The sound of the lock breaking free was satisfying, but at the same time it left her feeling exposed, like she had just unlocked a door into something unknown. Slowly, she lifted the chest's heavy lid. The creaking noise echoed in the small clearing, adding to the tension in the air. Inside, nestled among what appeared to be old cloth and straw, was a collection of objects, relics, each more mysterious than the last. Some of the items were small, intricate, and delicate, while others were larger and more imposing. She gently reached in and pulled out a small wooden box. It was beautifully carved with delicate designs on all sides. The craftsmanship was unlike anything she had ever seen. She ran her fingers over the smooth surface, marveling at how it had survived the years. There was something about it, a sense of history, as though it had a story to tell, but she didn't open it just yet. There were other objects to examine. She reached for another item, this time a strange-looking metal artifact. It was shaped like a key, but its edges were curved and ornate. It looked ancient, and for some reason it sent a shiver down her spine. What could this key unlock? And why had it been hidden away all these years? The more she dug through the chest, the more she realized that these objects weren't just valuable because of their age. They were valuable because of their significance. Each one seemed to tell a story that only the diary had begun to hint at. But she needed to know more. She needed to understand what these items meant and why they had been hidden away for so long. Her eyes caught on something else. A large, leather-bound book, much like the diary she had been reading. It was old, its pages yellowed with time. The cover was worn, but it was clear that this was another journal, one that had been written by someone who had come before her. She carefully picked it up, feeling the weight of it in her hands. The book opened with ease, the pages creaking softly as she turned them. The writing inside was familiar, the same looping script, the same cryptic descriptions. But this journal was different. It was written by someone who had lived in the house long after the first diary's author had passed. The entries were more recent, and they spoke of the items in the chest. Her fingers trembled as she read the first entry aloud to herself. "We've kept it hidden, for their sake, but it is time to reveal the truth. The Asheville collection is not just a collection of artifacts. It is the key to something much greater, something that has been guarded for centuries. The map will lead us to the next step, but only if we follow it carefully. The key, it is not just a key. It is the key to a secret that must never be allowed to fall into the wrong hands." Her pulse quickened as she continued reading, her mind racing to understand the words. The Asheville collection, the name she had read in the other diary, was not just a collection of valuable items. It was something more. The writer of this journal spoke of the map and the key, and how they were the path to something even greater than the collection itself. She quickly turned the pages, desperate for more information. The entries grew more urgent, more frantic as she read. The writer spoke of a growing threat, of someone trying to find the collection, of the need to keep it hidden at all costs. But then the entries stopped abruptly. The last page was left blank, as though the writer had been interrupted or had simply vanished. The realization hit her like a wave. This wasn't just about treasure. This was about protecting something powerful, something dangerous. Whatever the writer had been guarding, it was important enough to hide away for centuries, passed down from one generation to the next. And now she had stumbled into the middle of it. She looked at the key in her hand again, the one that seemed to hold so much significance. It was clear now that it wasn't just a decorative item. It had a purpose. But what was it for? The thought of unlocking whatever it was meant to open filled her with both excitement and dread. She carefully placed the key back in the chest and started to sift through the rest of the items. The metal artifacts, the small wooden boxes, they were all connected in some way, she was sure of it. But how? And what was the next step the journal had mentioned? She felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing her back to the maps she had seen earlier. The maps had to be the key. If she could decode them, follow the path they laid out, she might be able to figure out what she was meant to do next. With the chest now emptied of its contents, she stood up, holding the book in her hands. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She needed answers. And the answers were somewhere in the house. She had already uncovered so much, but the real mystery was still waiting for her to uncover. She began to walk back toward the house, the chest and its treasures in tow. Her heart pounded in her chest as she thought about everything she had learned. The Asheville collection, the mysterious key, the journal entries. What was the secret the house had been hiding for so long? And why had it been kept from the world? Back inside the cottage, she spread out the maps and the journal on the table once more. She sat down, her hands resting on the paper, her mind racing to make sense of it all. The mystery had deepened, and there was no going back now. She had crossed the threshold, and there was only one path forward. Whatever the house was hiding, whatever secret it had been keeping for generations, she was determined to uncover it. The more she examined the maps, The more she began to realize that the answers weren't going to come easily. She had hoped that the symbols, the diagrams, or even the strange objects in the chest would point to something clear, something that would unravel the mystery. But it wasn't that simple. Every time she thought she was close to an answer, another question seemed to surface. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces didn't quite fit, no matter how hard she tried. She had spent hours studying the maps and flipping through the journals. Her mind was tired, but she couldn't stop now. The key, the collection, the house, it was all connected, she was certain of that. And if she could just understand how, it would all make sense. It was late into the night when her eyes fell on something that she hadn't noticed before. One of the maps had a faded marking in the corner, a small X barely visible against the paper. She had thought it was just a tear or a smudge before, but now, in the quiet stillness of the room, it caught her attention. This small mark seemed significant, as if someone had left it there deliberately. Could this be the next step? Was this where the map was leading her? Her heart raced as she picked up the map, trying to see it in a new light. The X wasn't just a random mark. It was part of a larger pattern, a trail that she could follow. The excitement bubbled up inside her again. She wasn't just reading stories anymore. She was on the verge of uncovering something real, something buried under the weight of time. The house felt different now. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside seemed to whisper secrets. She could almost hear the house telling her to hurry, to follow the path laid out before her. The key, the chest, the items, they were all clues, each one a step closer to the truth. She stood up, the map in her hands, and walked to the window. Outside, the moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light across the yard. The house was quiet, but she could feel the presence of something ancient, something watching. She couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to follow the map, wherever it led. It wasn't long before she found herself outside, walking across the yard with a sense of purpose. The small mark on the map had given her direction, but the landscape around her seemed unfamiliar in the dark. The trees were twisted, their branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The wind rustled through the leaves, adding an eerie soundtrack to her journey. But she pressed on. She had to know what was waiting for her. The map led her to the far side of the property near the edge of the woods. There, hidden beneath a thick canopy of trees, she spotted something that made her stop dead in her tracks. A stone archway covered in vines stood at the entrance to a narrow, overgrown path. It was barely visible in the darkness, but the moment she laid eyes on it, she knew it was the right place. The map had led her here. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped toward the archway. The air seemed to grow heavier as she passed through it, like she was crossing a threshold into a different world. The path ahead was narrow, winding, and lined with tall, dense trees. The only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath her feet. It was as if the rest of the world had fallen away, leaving her in this forgotten space hidden from time. The further she walked, the more the sense of discovery grew. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she could feel it in her bones. The key, the chest, the collection, they had all led her to this point. The path seemed to stretch on forever, winding deeper into the woods, but there was no turning back now. She had come too far to stop. Eventually, the path opened up into another clearing. At the center of the clearing stood an old stone well. The stones surrounding it were weathered and cracked, but the well itself looked ancient, as though it had been there long before the house, long before the land had been settled. The moment she laid eyes on it, she knew this was where the next piece of the puzzle lay. She approached the well cautiously, her mind racing. The map had led her here for a reason. There had to be something hidden inside. Her hand trembled as she reached for the edge of the stone. She peered down into the darkness below. The well seemed to go on forever, its depths impossible to see. The air around her was thick, as if the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to make the next move. She didn't hesitate. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the rope that hung loosely by the side of the well and pulled it. The old bucket creaked as it rose, its descent slow and deliberate. When the bucket finally reached the surface, she could see that it wasn't empty. Inside, wrapped in layers of cloth, was something gleaming faintly in the dim light. The excitement surged through her once again. This was it. She reached into the bucket and carefully unwrapped the cloth. What she found took her breath away. It was a book. Not just any book, but one that seemed older than anything she had ever seen. Its cover was embossed with strange symbols, the same symbols she had seen on the chest and the maps. This was it, the missing piece. With trembling hands, she opened the book. The pages were yellowed and brittle, but the writing was still legible. It was written in the same looping script as the diary, but this time the entries were longer, more detailed. It spoke of the Asheville collection, but this was no ordinary collection. It was a collection of knowledge, ancient secrets, maps, and hidden truths passed down through generations. As she read, it became clear that the collection was never meant to be a treasure in the traditional sense. The items, each one, represented something far greater, pieces of a key to unlock an ancient power. This power had been hidden for centuries, protected from those who would use it for their own gain. The collection was not just about wealth, it was about control. Whoever held the collection would hold the key to an unimaginable force. The book spoke of a final test, one that had been designed to ensure that only the worthy could unlock the secrets of the collection. It wasn't about finding treasure or riches. It was about wisdom, understanding, and the ability to protect this knowledge from those who would misuse it. Her heart raced as she read the final words of the book. The key has been passed down, and now it is your turn. You hold the map, the journal, and the artifacts. But the final test is yet to come. Only when you understand the purpose of the collection will you be ready to use it. But be warned, power is never given without cost. She closed the book, the weight of its words sinking in. The secret of the Asheville collection was more than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about discovering what had been hidden. It was about understanding its significance. And it wasn't a simple matter of possession. It was a responsibility. The wind began to pick up, rustling the leaves around her. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. She had uncovered the truth, but now she had to decide what to do with it. She was the keeper of the collection now, but that didn't mean she was ready for the power it held. She knew she couldn't keep it for herself. The world wasn't ready for the truth. The knowledge she had uncovered could change everything. As she stood there holding the book in her hands, she made a decision. She wouldn't keep it. She wouldn't allow the collection to fall into the wrong hands. It was a burden, but one she was willing to carry. She would protect the secret of the Asheville collection, just as those before her had done. And with that, she turned and walked back toward the house, the weight of the book in her hands, and the future of the collection still unknown.